There is an old line attributed to Benjamin Franklin at the signing of the Declaration of Independence. We must all hang together, or most assuredly, we shall all hang separately. Now, whether you're talking about a revolution, a political movement, a campaign, a church, a business, or a family, the principle is the same. Division has a cost. Pride has a cost. Ego has a cost. And when people who should be fighting the same battle decide to spend their ammunition on each other, the enemy does not have to work nearly as hard. And this is where a lot of conservatives are right now. We are in one of those moments where the movement has to decide whether it is serious about winning, governing, and building something that lasts, or more interested in proving who's the purest, or who's the toughest, who's the most offended, or who can collect the most online applause by tearing down somebody else on the same side. Peter Roth wrote a piece in the Daily Caller news foundation called Conservatives Can Either Hang Together or Hang Separately. And the title alone gets to the heart of the problem. You don't have to go, you don't have to go into battle with your forces divided. You don't have to walk into a midterm election cycle with the country still deeply divided, with the left still organized, with the administrative state still entrenched, and legacy media still hostile, and the cultural institutions still dominated by progressive assumptions, and then decide that the most important thing to do is hold a circular firing squad. That does not mean conservatives have to agree on everything. That would be impossible. And honestly, it wouldn't be healthy. Conservatism has never been a single file marching in identical opinions. It's always had factions. There's always been some economic conservatives, social conservatives, national security hawks, libertarians, populists, constitutionalists, religious conservatives, business conservatives. You know what I'm saying? America First conservatives, Reagan conservatives, Trump conservatives, and plenty of people who do not fit cleanly into any one of those categories. This is not automatically weakness. That can be strength. But it is only if those differences sharpen the movement instead of destroying it. There's a difference between debate and sabotage. There's a difference between criticism and demolition. There's a difference between saying, I think this institution is wrong on this issue, and saying this institution must be burned to the freaking ground because it failed my purity test. That distinction matters because movements do not survive if every disagreement turns into an excommunication. This is one of the great dangers on the right today. Too many people have confused performance with principle. Too many people think that the louder they attack someone on their own side, the more courageous they must be. Too many people think that they can destroy a conservative institution, conservative commentator, conservative lawmaker, conservative donor network, and somehow prove their own seriousness. But destruction is not the same thing as leadership. Did you hear what I said? Destruction is not the same thing as leadership. Being angry is not the same as being correct. And tearing down a house is a lot easier than building one. Now, Roth points to the 1992 election as a warning sign. It is a warning worth remembering. George H.W. Bush went back on his famous no new taxes pledge. No new taxes, remember? And that betrayal helped split the coalition that had put him in office. By the time the election was over, Bill Clinton had won the presidency with only a plurality of the popular vote, while Ross Perot pulled almost 19%. Now, people can debate forever whether Perot cost Bush the election directly or indirectly or not at all. But the larger lesson is not complicated. When a coalition fractures, the other side benefits. And that's not ancient history. That's political law. The left understands this better than the right. The left will fight internally. The left will argue. The left has radicals, moderates, socialists, bureaucrats, liberals, union bosses, campus activists, climate activists, racial activists, corporate progressives, and all sorts of competing tribes. But when power is on the line, they usually find a way to point in the same direction. They may hate each other privately, but they understand the machinery of power publicly. Conservatives often do the exact opposite. Conservatives can be brilliant at diagnosing the disease and terrible at organizing the treatment. We can explain the Constitution. We can quote the founders. We can identify the corruption of the media, the arrogance of the bureaucracy, the failures of education, and the cultural rot coming out of the universities. But then, instead of building durable institutions, training candidates, funding media, supporting legal organizations, winning school boards, and taking territory, we get distracted by internal feuds that make everybody feel important and accomplish very little. Now, this is not an argument for silence. Let me be clear about that. No institution on the right should ever be above criticism. No leader should be above criticism. No think tank, donor, elected official, podcast host, strategist, activist, no party chairman, president, no movement celebrity should be treated as untouchable. That's not conservatism. That's cult behavior. Healthy movements require accountability. Healthy movements require pressure. Healthy movements require argument. But healthy movements also require judgment. The question is not, can we criticize? Of course we can. The question is, what are we trying to accomplish with the criticism? Are we correcting? Are we strengthening? Are we forcing a necessary debate? Are we exposing real corruption? Are we defending the voters? Are we protecting the Constitution? Or are we just trying to score points? Build a brand and prove that we are more authentic than the next guy. And that's where the danger is. Because if the purpose of criticism is correction, then criticism has value. If the purpose of criticism is destruction, then the left will sit back and enjoy the show. Roth spends time defending the role of the Heritage Foundation. And that is a conversation conservatives need to handle with maturity. Heritage is not just another Washington organization, because for decades, Heritage has been one of the major institutions that help bring conservative policy into the mainstream. Tax policy, regulation, national defense, constitutionalism, the proper limits of government, regulation, national defense, all this stuff, right? Heritage has been in the middle of these fights for a very, very long time. Now, does that mean that Heritage is always right? Well, no. Does that mean Heritage has never made mistakes? Well, no. Does that mean that conservatives would simply salute and never question the direction of the organization? Well, absolutely not. That'd be stupid. But it does mean that serious people should understand the difference between reforming an institution and destroying it. That distinction seems to be getting lost. There are people on the right who now talk as though every older conservative institution is useless, compromised, outdated, or part of the problem. Some of that frustration is understandable. The conservative establishment failed in real ways. It failed to stop the growth of government and to take cultural power seriously. It failed to understand how deeply the left had captured education, media, entertainment, all the stuff. It failed to listen to working class voters. It failed to see populist voting coming, that populist vote coming. It just failed. It failed to understand that the base was tired of being told to vote harder while nothing changed. Those failures were absolutely positively real. But here's the question. Does that mean every institution built before 2016 should be destroyed? Well, of course not. That's stupid. The answer to stale institution is renewal, not arson. The answer to weak leadership is better leadership, not institutional suicide. The answer to past mistakes is reform, not pretending that we can rebuild an entire movement from scratch through social media outrage. Now, this is where Trump and changed the conservative movement. And there is no honest way to discuss the current right without saying so. Donald Trump did not govern like a traditional Reagan era conservative. He didn't talk like one. He did not prioritize issues the same way on trade. Let's name them: trade, immigration, foreign policy, entitlement policies, industrial policy, and the relationship between government and big business. Trump shifted the center of gravity on the right. Some conservatives love that. Some hated it. Some people just suggested it. Some never did. Some still believe the old fusionist model is the only legitimate conservatism. Others believe the old model failed and has to be replaced. The argument is not going away. And it shouldn't go away. It is a real argument about what conservatism means in the modern 21st century. But even that argument has to be disciplined by the reality of power. If conservatives spend all their energy fighting over whether they're Reaganites or Bush conservatives or Trump conservatives, populists, national conservatives, or constitutional conservatives, then the left wins the actual institutions while the right wins in the comment section. That's not strategy. That's self-indulgence. The goal of politics is to have is not to have the cleanest faction. The goal is to win enough power to protect liberty, secure the country, defend families, restrain government, appoint judges, control spending, and all the stuff, and push back against the cultural left. Now that requires a coalition. A coalition means you work with people you agree with on the mission, even when they don't agree with you on every detail, on every jot and tittle. Unity does not mean uniformity. That's the key. Conservatives do not need to agree on every policy question. They don't need to have the same tone. They don't need to read from the same script. They don't need to worship the same political personalities, but they do need to know who the real opposition is. The real opposition is not the conservative who disagrees with you on tariffs. The real opposition is those who think, that tank scholars should still like free trade, right? The real opposition is not the populist who thinks corporate America has become too woke and too powerful. The real opposition is not the social conservative who wants the movement to talk more about family and faith. The real opposition is not the libertarian who worries about government overreach. Those are internal arguments. The real opposition is the collectivist impulse that wants more government control over your life. The real opposition is the ideology that believes your children belong to the system before they belong to you. The real opposition is the bureaucracy that thinks elections are interruptions in its permanent rule. The real opposition is the media class that believes conservative voters are a problem to be managed rather than citizens to be heard. The real opposition is a cultural elite that calls normal Americans extreme while defending every destructive social experiment that comes down the road. That is the fight. And if conservatives forget that, they will lose. This is especially important heading into the midterms. Midterm elections are not won by people who sit around arguing about who betrayed whom in the last ideological conference. Midterms are won by turnout, message discipline, candidate quality, local organization, fundraising, media reach, voter registration, chasing where legal, legal preparedness, and a clear contrast with the opposition. They are won by people who understand that politics is not only about being correct, it's about being effective. Now, that's something the right has to learn again. Being right is not enough. You can be right about the border and still lose. You can be right about inflation and still lose. You can be right about schools and still lose. You can be right about crime and lose. You can be right about media bias and lose. You can be right about the weaponization of government and lose. You can, if you can't organize, persuade, fund, communicate, and unify at the moment it matters, your correctness becomes a private comfort instead of a public victory. And my friends, that is not good enough. The conservative movement needs to recover the ability to argue hard and still work together. That used to be normal. You could have a brutal debate in the room and walk out understanding that the other side was still the left. Now, too many people want to turn every disagreement into a public execution. Folks, that's not courage. That's political immaturity dressed up as principle. Now, at the Tea Party movement, I told people all the time, a bunch of people, a bunch of amateurs got into the deal. And I was one of them. But a bunch of really immature people got in. And now we're seeing them. We're seeing some of them rise to some sort of authority and power. Now, there's also a spiritual lesson here, whether people want to admit it or not. Pride destroys more movements than weakness does. Pride tells people they are too important to compromise. Pride tells them that they are too pure to cooperate. Pride tells them that anyone who disagrees with them must be corrupt, stupid, cowardly, or bought off. Pride turns allies into enemies and disagreements into wars. And once pride takes over, the movement becomes less about the country and more about personal vindication. And conservatives can't afford that. The country can't afford that. Because the left is not taking a vacation. The bureaucracy is not taking a vacation. The educational establishment is not taking a vacation, even in the summertime. The media is not taking a vacation. The activists who want to reshape the country, they're organizing. They're staffing agencies. They're influencing corporations. They're training lawyers. They're grooming candidates. They're capturing institutions. They're fighting for power. So the question for conservatives is simple. Are we serious? If we are serious, then we need to stop confusing disagreement with betrayal. We need to stop treating every institution as disposable. We need to stop rewarding people who profit from permanent outrage, but never build anything. We need to stop letting social media incentives dictate movement strategy. We gotta stop pretending that a coalition can survive if every faction demands total surrender from every other faction. The better path is unity without uniformity. Did you hear what I said? The better path is unity without uniformity. Debate the issues, challenge the leaders, reform the institutions, demand accountability, replace failure, promote new voices, build new platforms. But do not forget the purpose is victory, not vanity. Now, the Heritage Foundation can be criticized and still be valuable. The Trump movement can be defended and still be corrected. Reagan's legacy can be honored without pretending the year is 1984. Populists can challenge the old establishment without acting like history began when they opened the social media account, when they got involved in the Tea Party movement, right? traditional conservatives can defend their principles without acting like every change is a betrayal. There is room for argument. There is room for correction. There is room for adaptation. But there is not room for self-destruction. Because if conservatives tear down every institution, alienate every ally, fracture every coalition, and spend the next election cycle proving who is the most righteous loser, the left will not mourn. The left will celebrate. And when conservatives wake up and discover that the courts, the agencies, schools, media, culture, and the machinery of government has moved even further away from them, it will not be enough to simply say, well, at least we're pure. That is not victory. That is surrender with better branding. So yes, conservatives can either hang together or they can hang separately. They can either argue like adults and unite when it matters, or they can keep mistaking internal warfare for courage. They can either build a movement capable of governing, or they can build a collection of angry factions capable of only complaining. God, the complaining. They can either strengthen institutions, reform them, and create new ones, or they can burn everything to the freaking ground and then wonder why nothing remains when power is needed. The choice is not between blind loyalty or endless rebellion. The choice is between disciplined unity and political suicide. And for conservatives who say they care about the country, the Constitution, the family, the church, or the board of the economy, the courts, the schools, and the future of the republic, this should not be a hard choice. Fight the fights that matter. Sharpen the movement. Correct what's broken. Build what's missing. But when the time comes to face the left, stop aiming at each other. Because divided forces do not win battles. And divided movements do not save countries. My name is Willie Lawson. This is the Mona Report. Till we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sakes, y'all take care of yourself. We will see you when we see you. Bye now.